Laura Gibson stared at the screen until the pixels seemed to blur into abstract art. The digital confetti of likes and heart emojis felt like a mockery as she scrolled past the image that had upended her weekend. There, in the sea of faces at her friend's wedding, was her own, digitally nipped and tucked to fit into an unforgiving frame of beauty standards. She had uploaded the image herself, with all the naivety of someone who believed that maybe this time she'd blend in. But the internet had a cruel way of distorting reflections. The comments were a deluge, each one a drop in the bucket of her dwindling self-esteem. "Try being real for once," one said. "Who are you trying to fool?" asked another. Each word was a gut punch to her reality. She was a graphic designer, an artist who reveled in the creation of beauty, yet here she was, unable to recognize her own. Amidst the vitriol, a single comment stood out, a whisper in a storm. It was from a stranger, pointing not to the doctored image of herself, but to a candid shot in the background. "The girl behind the roses, she's beautiful." Laura had barely noticed herself there, laughing, unguarded, and unnoticed by the unforgiving lens of social media. She pushed the thought away. Real wasn't what people wanted. Work was a welcome distraction, but even the array of logos and layouts on her screen couldn't eclipse the sting of the morning's ordeal. She found herself touching her face, tracing the lines and curves that had been deemed unworthy. Lunchtime conversations buzzed around her, but she felt adrift, caught between the world she inhabited and the one she presented online. The day trudged on, a slog of revisions and mock-ups, her mind a carousel of should-haves and what-ifs. Should she have just posted the untouched photo? What if she just stopped this charade altogether? The questions were relentless. The sun was a low-hanging sigh in the sky when Laura's phone buzzed. It was Alex, her older brother, texting her their usual Monday debrief. "Pizza and venting, my treat," it read. She considered declining, but Alex had always been her harbor in the storm. That evening, over greasy slices and the comforting clatter of dishes, Laura's veneer cracked. Alex listened, his face a mosaic of concern and anger, as she recounted the day's digital crucifixion. "You're more than the sum of your likes, Laura," Alex said, his voice firm yet gentle. "When was the last time you posted something that wasn't filtered through 100 expectations?" Laura wanted to argue, to defend her carefully curated online presence, but the fight had gone out of her. He was right. Somewhere along the way, she had lost sight of herself, chasing pixels instead of reality. "You could be a voice, you know," Alex continued, a spark in his eyes. "One that says, it's okay to be imperfect in a world that pretends it's not." Laura's heart thrummed with a cocktail of fear and exhilaration. It was a call to arms, one she wasn't sure she was brave enough to answer. But as she looked across the table into her brother's earnest face, a seed of resolve planted itself in the furrows of her doubts. That night, Laura sat in the quiet of her apartment, the glow of her phone illuminating the resolve hardening on her face. With a trembling finger, she opened the camera, took a deep breath, and pressed record. Her voice was a whisper at first, but it grew steadier with each word. "Hi, everyone. Let's talk about what's real." The morning sun streamed through the blinds of Laura's apartment, painting stripes of courage across the room. She lay in bed, a cocoon of warmth, her phone a silent sentinel on the nightstand. It had been a week since she posted the video, her declaration of authenticity. Her finger hovered over the device, apprehensive of what she might find. The video had been raw, unfiltered, her without the digital makeup. She had talked about the wedding photo fiasco, her voice wavering but determined, her face devoid of the usual cosmetic armor. Finally, she picked up the phone. The notification bar was a cascade of alerts, comments stacked upon comments. With a deep breath, she dove into the digital tide that awaited her. There were messages of support, heartfelt and uplifting, mingling with the expected undercurrent of dissent. But amidst the cacophony, one message stood out. It was an invitation from a local community college asking her to speak at their next body positivity workshop. They had seen her video and wanted her to share her story. Lara's initial reaction was to decline. Public speaking was a beast far more intimidating than the anonymous eyes of social media. Yet, as she sat amidst the soft pillows, she realized this was the call to adventure she hadn't known she was waiting for. It was one thing to bare her soul to a camera. It was another to stand before a crowd, her every imperfection on display. The week passed in a blur of anticipation and dread. The workshop loomed over her like a mountain, its peak shrouded in the mist of uncertainty. She prepared a speech, practiced in front of Alex, and tried to control the tremor in her hands. When the day arrived, she stood backstage, her heart a frantic drummer in her chest. The organizer, a buoyant woman named Marianne, gave her an encouraging smile. "You'll be great," Marianne said. "Just speak from the heart." The room was a sea of faces, young and old, all waiting to hear her speak. Lara stepped onto the stage, the lights a harsh embrace, the microphone a lifeline. She started tentatively, her voice a thread of silk, easily broken. But as she wove her tale, the thread strengthened, spun from vulnerability into something resembling confidence. She spoke of the wedding photo, the comments, and the video that had brought her here. She talked about the pressure of perfection, the facade of filters, and the liberation of letting go. And as she shared her story, the faces before her transformed from an intimidating crowd into individuals, each with their own silent battles with acceptance. The applause at the end of her talk was a surprise, a warm wave washing over her. People came up to her afterwards, sharing their stories, thanking her for her words. Lara left the workshop with a sense of accomplishment, but more importantly, with the realization that her journey was no longer just her own. She had tapped into a collective yearning for authenticity, and it was empowering. That night, as Lara reflected on the day, she recognized the shift within her. The reluctance that had dogged her steps was receding, replaced by a newfound purpose. She was no longer just grappling with her insecurities. She was confronting them, challenging them, and in doing so, challenging the very culture that had bred them. The next morning, Lara made a decision. She would not simply react to the world as it was. She would act to shape it into what it could be. She sat down and penned a blog post, a manifesto of sorts, outlining her vision for a social media that celebrated reality over retouching, substance over surface. She hit publish, her heart a mix of defiance and hope. It was a small step, but it was in the right direction. And with each step, she felt the ground beneath her becoming more solid, the path ahead more clear. She was Lara Gibson, unfiltered and undaunted. And this was just the beginning. Lara's fingertips hesitated above the keyboard, her mind racing as fast as her heart. The digital battleground before her was fraught with both praise and contempt, but it was the support that fortified her resolve. Each affirmative comment on her blog was a beacon in the murky waters of online discourse. Her campaign for unfiltered authenticity, unfiltered realness, had ignited a spark that was now a wildfire of shared stories and bare-faced selfies. She had transformed her vulnerability into a rallying cry, and now she was not alone. The movement had grown beyond her, becoming a tapestry of lives unhidden and unashamed. Yet, for each supportive message, there was a dart of negativity aimed to wound. Lara had braced herself for this. She knew that challenging the status quo would paint a target on her back. The collaboration with Tasha, a well-known body positivity advocate, had been a leap into a larger arena. Their live-stream discussion had reverberated across the social media landscape, and Lara found herself at the center of a growing community that hungered for change. The hashtag they had discussed, unfiltered realness, had trended, sparking a movement that celebrated the unedited human form in all its diverse glory. But as Lara watched the hashtag flourish, a counter-movement emerged. Better Than Real became the cynical response from those clinging to digital perfection. It was a reminder that the cultural obsession with flawless imagery was deeply entrenched. The backlash was a shadow that loomed over her efforts, but Lara refused to let it engulf the light she had helped kindle. She crafted her response carefully, addressing not the purveyors of the polished facades, but the individuals who had found solace in her message. Her words were an affirmation of the campaign's intent, to uplift rather than undermine, to celebrate rather than shame. She called on her followers to continue sharing their stories, to stand firm against the tide of airbrushed illusions. As she published her response, Lara felt the weight of her role as a leader. She was a beacon for those navigating the stormy seas of self-acceptance, and she was determined to guide them safely to shore. With each new, unfiltered realness post, Lara's conviction grew stronger. She was no mere participant in this digital revolution, she was a commander, and her keyboard was her sword. In the face of opposition, she stood unwavering, her campaign a testament to the enduring power of authenticity. As Lara scrolled through the cascade of images under an unfiltered realness, each face told a story of defiance against the curated norms of beauty. The campaign had taken on a life of its own, with thousands now wearing their truths like armor. Yet, the digital sphere was a dual-faced entity, and the better-than-real brigade was its darker side, a stark reminder that for every action there was an equal and opposite reaction. The negativity that stemmed from Better Than Real was a poison, seeping into Lara's campaign, threatening to tarnish the progress made. But Lara knew that to engage with the antagonists directly would only fuel their fire. Instead, she decided to focus on the positive, to amplify the voices of change and empowerment that her movement had galvanized. With each story shared, with every unfiltered selfie posted, the community around darn unfiltered realness grew stronger. Lara spent her days responding to messages, offering words of encouragement, and sharing content that aligned with the campaign's ethos. Her own social media feed had become a beacon of hope for many, a space where honesty was valued over perfection. Yet for all the positivity she fostered, Lara could not ignore the undercurrent of opposition. The body positivity workshops had become her sanctuary, a place where the digital world's harshness gave way to genuine human connection. It was at one such workshop that Lara met Erin, a young woman whose laughter was as infectious as her story was poignant. Erin had been following Nagar Unfiltered Realness for weeks, finding in it the courage to embrace her own skin, scarred but beautiful from years of battling a chronic condition. She approached Lara after the workshop, her eyes alight with gratitude. "Your campaign, it's changed how I see myself. It's like I've been given permission to be me, without filters, without fear," Erin confessed, her voice a tremulous melody of newfound confidence. Lara was humbled, her eyes misting over with emotion. It was stories like Erin's that fueled her determination to keep pushing forward, to keep fighting for a world where every scar, every line, and every imperfection was celebrated rather than concealed. Bolstered by the encounter, Lara returned home with a renewed sense of purpose. She sat down to draft her next blog post, a reflection on the true faces of beauty she'd met, the real lives touched by the campaign. She wrote about Erin, about the shared laughter and tears, and the collective strength found in vulnerability. As Lara hit publish on her latest post, she realized she was no longer just a solitary crusader against the monolith of digital deception. She was part of a chorus, their voices harmonizing in a song of self-acceptance that was growing louder each day. Lara's inbox was a mixed tapestry of personal victories and shared struggles. As Unfiltered Realness continued to trend, the stories poured in, each one a unique thread in the vibrant quilt of the movement. However, the swell of support was not without its undercurrent of backlash. The Better Than Real campaign had not receded. Instead, it surged with renewed vigor, its proponents more vocal than ever. Undeterred, Lara focused on the upcoming event she had organized, a live panel discussion featuring voices from her Unfiltered Realness community. It was set to be a cornerstone event, one that would bring the digital movement into the tangible world. As she finalized the preparations, Lara felt the gravity of what she had created. It was no longer just an online campaign. It was a cultural dialogue that demanded to be acknowledged. The panel was a mosaic of experiences, with individuals from all walks of life sharing their journeys towards self-acceptance. The audience was receptive, their applause thunderous, their engagement evident in the sea of nodding heads and the occasional glisten of a tearful eye. Lara, who had once dreaded public speaking, now thrived on it, her voice a clarion call amidst the noise of societal expectations. After the panel, as the crowd mingled and the hum of conversation filled the air, Lara caught sight of Aaron, her face radiant, a tangible embodiment of the campaign's impact. They embraced, and Aaron whispered words of thanks that etched themselves into Lara's heart. However, the triumph of the event was marred by an unexpected turn. The following day, a smear article appeared online, discrediting the unfiltered realness movement as a haven for attention seekers and dismissing the panel discussion as a pity party. The article went viral, fueled by the same vitriolic energy that powered Better Than Real. Lara's initial reaction was a cold nod of shock, quickly followed by a flush of anger. The article misconstrued their messages, twisted their stories, and sought to undermine the very foundation of their cause. But as she read the article again, Lara's anger gave way to resolve. She would not let misrepresentation sway her or her community. She penned an open letter in response, not just to the article's author, but to anyone who had ever felt marginalized by the media's narrow definitions of beauty. She defended the authenticity and bravery of the unfiltered realness contributors and called for a deeper, more compassionate understanding of the movement's goals. The letter was shared across social media platforms, sparking a new wave of dialogue. Support flooded in, drowning out the bitterness of the smear campaign. For every attempt to discredit them, the community grew stronger, their resolve firmer, their voices louder. Lara's campaign had evolved into something unassailable, a force that thrived on truth and resilience. She was at the helm, steering them through stormy waters into a dawn of acceptance. The open letter was a beacon, a lighthouse guiding ships through a storm. Lara's words resonated, echoing across the vast digital expanse. Her defense of Chak's unfiltered realness was not just a rebuttal to the smear article. It was an affirmation of every individual's right to self-expression and self-love. The community rallied, their shared outrage a binding force, and their support a shield against the barrage of negativity. But the article had struck a nerve, and Lara felt the sting of exposure. It was a reminder of how public her personal journey had become, how vulnerable her mission to scrutiny and attack. The opposition had manifested not as faceless trolls, but as a concerted effort to dismantle what she had built. In the midst of this, a new challenge emerged. The virality of the article had attracted the attention of a prominent social media influencer, known for her perfectly curated image and her large following. She posted a scathing video critiquing the unfiltered realness movement, calling it a glorified cry for attention masked as empowerment. The video was a blow, a wave that threatened to capsize the ship Lara had worked so hard to steer. Her followers looked to her for a response, for guidance on how to navigate this new attack. Lara felt the weight of her responsibility, the need to respond not with anger, but with the poise of a true leader. It was then that Lara decided to invite the influencer to a live debate. It was a bold move, one that would put her directly in the line of fire. But Lara knew that to avoid confrontation would be to show weakness, to let the cynicism and skepticism win. The influencer accepted, and the stage was set for a confrontation that would either make or break the unfiltered realness campaign. The debate was heated, with pointed questions and passionate rebuttals. Lara stood her ground, her arguments a blend of personal testimony and empirical data. She spoke of the lives changed, the confidence built, and the community forged from shared struggles and triumphs. As the debate progressed, something remarkable happened. The influencer's facade began to crack, her arguments losing steam against the undeniable impact of Lara's words. It was not a victory won by domination, but by truth. A truth that resonated with the audience, both live and online. In the aftermath of the debate, Unfiltered Realness saw a surge in support. The influencer's followers began to question the relentless pursuit of perfection, and many joined Lara's movement, sharing their own unfiltered stories. Lara had turned a potential catastrophe into a rallying cry, her resolve turning the tide in their favor. The battle had been fierce, and while Lara knew that the war was far from over, she had secured a decisive victory. Unfiltered Realness was more than a campaign. It was a testament to the power of authenticity in a world saturated with artifice. In the quiet aftermath of the debate, Lara found herself alone with the echo of her own courage. The adrenaline that had fueled her words had ebbed away, leaving a deep exhaustion in its wake. The influencer's concession had been a hard-fought victory, but the battle had taken its toll. Lara felt the weight of her campaign as a heavy cloak around her shoulders, a mantle she wasn't sure she could carry much longer. Doubt began to creep in, whispering that every triumph was just the precursor to a greater fall. The Unfiltered Realness community was thriving, but the opposition remained a hydra, each head cut off sprouting two more. The negative comments, once easy to dismiss, now seemed to find their mark with unerring accuracy. Lara's next blog post was a struggle. The words that usually flowed so freely were now a trickle, stifled by insecurities and the fear of being not enough. The smear article and the influencer's attack had left scars, invisible but indelible. She found herself questioning the impact of her work. Was she truly making a difference, or was she just shouting into the void? It was Alex who found her at her lowest, hunched over her laptop, the cursor blinking mockingly on a blank document. His knock was soft, but his presence was a balm to her frayed nerves. "You've started a conversation that's echoing around the world, Lara," Alex said, his voice a firm tether pulling her back from the brink. "Don't let the bastards grind you down." His words were a lifeline, and Lara grasped them with both hands. She poured her fears and doubts into her blog, not as a cry for help, but as a beacon for those who might also be faltering. Her post was raw and vulnerable, an open display of her own struggle with the very issues she fought against. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Messages of support flooded in, each one a testament to the strength of the community she had built. Her followers shared their own stories of doubt and resilience, a chorus of voices that refused to be silenced by fear or criticism. Buoyed by their support, Lara found her second wind. She organized a series of live chats, inviting members of the Unfiltered Realness community to share their journeys. The sessions were cathartic, a space where vulnerability was not a weakness but a shared strength. The tide had turned once more, and Lara rode its crest. She had peered into the abyss and found not emptiness, but a reflection of herself, imperfect, uncertain, but undeniably real. And in that reflection, she found the resolve to continue her campaign, not as a flawless hero, but as a true advocate for the beauty of the unfiltered human experience. Lara's latest blog post resonated like a struck bell, its reverberations felt in the hearts of her community. The honesty with which she shared her doubts had fortified the bond with her followers, who now saw her not just as a leader, but as a kindred spirit. But as the movement grew, so did the scrutiny, and with it, a looming sense of foreboding. The Unfiltered Realness community was thriving, yet there were rumblings of a counter-movement that sought to undermine their progress. Lara received word of a rival event being organized, one that promised to reveal the truth behind the so-called authenticity crusade. The whispers were of a well-funded campaign, backed by entities that had much to lose should Lara's message continue to spread. The night before the rival event, Lara sat in the soft glow of her computer screen, the cursor a steady pulse in the dimness of the room. A decision lay before her. To confront this new challenge head-on could mean risking everything she had built. To ignore it could grant it unchallenged air to grow. With a steadying breath, Lara drafted a call to her followers, not to protest or to engage in online warfare, but to host a simultaneous event, celebrating their truths, their unfiltered stories. The next day, as the rival event unfolded with its polished veneer and sharp suits, the Unfiltered Realness live stream began. Faces from around the globe filled the screen, each person sharing their unedited beauty, their raw, real lives. The contrast could not have been starker. On one side, a narrative of control and manipulation. On the other, a celebration of human diversity and authenticity. But as Lara watched her community shine, a private message arrived. It was a tip from someone inside the rival campaign, a whistleblower moved by the authenticity of Dacia's unfiltered realness. The message contained evidence of the deliberate misinformation being spread to discredit Lara's movement, tactics paid for by those who profited from the insecurities of others. The revelation was a bombshell, one that could tilt the scales in their favor. Lara was faced with a choice: to expose the deceit and claim victory, or to continue to focus on the positive message of her campaign. It was a crossroads, one that held the power to define the future of our unfiltered realness. With the weight of her community's trust on her shoulders, Lara chose to reveal the truth. She shared the whistleblower's evidence, not with malice, but with a call for transparency and integrity in the conversation around beauty and self-worth. The fallout was immediate. The rival event crumbled as the truth of its intentions came to light. Lara's movement, bolstered by the revelation, grew stronger, its message vindicated. Yet, victory was not without its cost. The backlash was fierce, the attacks personal, and Lara knew that the fight was far from over. But in this moment, Lara stood triumphant, her campaign a beacon of hope against the darkness of deceit. She had stared down the Goliath of corporate interests and emerged victorious, her integrity intact, her mission clearer than ever. As the dust settled from the revelation of the rival event's true nature, Lara sat amidst the quiet triumph of her apartment, the early morning light casting a serene glow across the room. The community's victory was not just hers, but belonged to every person who had dared to stand up to the scrutiny of the world and declare their worth. Lara's phone was a testament to their success, messages of gratitude and stories of inspiration pouring in. The unmasking of the deceit had galvanized the movement, lending it a credibility that could no longer be denied. But with the rise in visibility came a new set of challenges, and Lara knew the road ahead would be paved with them. She reflected on her journey, the moments of doubt and fear that had so often threatened to derail her. In confronting these shadows, she had found not just her own strength, but had helped others discover theirs. The campaign had started as a whisper, a tentative step toward self-acceptance, but it had grown into a roar, a chorus of voices united in their diversity. It was time to move forward, to take unfiltered realness to the next level. Lara began to lay the groundwork for a nonprofit organization, one that would continue the work of the movement and support those struggling with body image in a tangible way. She envisioned workshops, outreach programs, and partnerships with other movements that aligned with their ethos. The response to her plans was overwhelming. Donations poured in, volunteers stepped forward, and a board of directors formed, comprised of voices from within the community, each bringing their unique perspective and expertise. The launch of the nonprofit was a quiet affair, a soft-spoken declaration of their permanence in the face of an often fickle digital world. Lara stood before the small crowd gathered, her heart full. She spoke of the journey they had all undertaken, the battles fought and the victories won. She spoke of the future, bright with the promise of change and the continuation of their shared mission. As the event came to a close, Lara felt a sense of completion. The movement had grown beyond her, becoming a living entity fueled by the stories and strength of its members. She had ignited a spark, but it was the community that had fanned it into a flame. In the quiet of her apartment, Lara updated her blog for what felt like the 1,000th time. This post, however, was different. It was a thank you, a missive of gratitude to every person who had joined the campaign, who had shared their story, who had believed in the vision of Lara's unfiltered realness. She signed off with a promise, a vow to continue advocating for authenticity and self-love in a world often too harsh for such soft things. Lara had begun her journey seeking to change the world, but in the end, she realized it was the world that had changed her.